When I first met my fiancée, she was upfront about one thing. You knew I had debt when you met me. It's part of the package. At the time, I thought I understood what that meant. Honestly, I thought I was prepared to handle it. I said, got it. But I was wrong. So, here's how everything unfolded. The story of how I learned just what that package really entailed and why it ended up being one of the hardest lessons about love, money, and boundaries that I've ever faced. From the very beginning, there were little red flags I ignored. Our third date, for example, was the first hint. She ordered the most expensive item on the menu, and then, almost casually, she told me she'd forgotten her wallet at home. Of course, I paid. I didn't think much of it. I just figured it was an honest mistake. After all, everyone forgets their wallet sometimes, right? But then came the next red flag. We had planned a weekend getaway together, something we were both looking forward to. Out of the blue, she asked me to cover her portion of the expenses. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was having a rough patch financially. I told myself it was temporary. By month 6, though, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Every dinner, every movie night, every shared expense somehow landed on my plate. I was covering groceries, rent, utilities, and even some of her credit card minimum payments when she said she was short. And I kept justifying it, because I loved her, and I believed her when she said she had some debt from college and a previous relationship. She told me it wasn't major, just part of her story. Honestly, she was everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, charming, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it. My friends were jealous. My parents adored her. When she moved into my apartment after 8 months together, I thought we were taking the next natural step in a serious relationship. Little did I know, the real story was just starting to reveal itself. One day, while organizing the mail, I accidentally glanced at some credit card statements. What I saw made my stomach drop. Balances on multiple cards, all maxed out. Not just a few thousand, but tens of thousands of dollars. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. Instead, she sat me down and reminded me she'd been honest from the beginning about having debt. Technically, she was right, but there's a huge difference between saying, I have some college debt, and actually revealing a financial disaster that could drag both our futures down. She assured me she had a plan, that she was working on it, and just needed time to get back on her feet. Meanwhile, she'd contribute what she could to our shared expenses. But honestly, that wasn't much. Meanwhile, I found myself covering nearly everything. My savings, which I had been carefully building for years, started to drain fast. And when I brought it up, she reminded me that relationships require sacrifice. She said if I truly loved her, her problems would become our problems. I wanted to believe that was true. The proposal happened on a beautiful beach in California, during what was supposed to be a romantic vacation. I'd saved for months to afford the trip, the ring, and to make that moment perfect. When she said yes, with tears in her eyes, for a moment, all my financial worries seemed to disappear. This was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. But reality hit hard, and fast. Just 2 weeks later, she started apartment hunting. Not just any places, but listings that cost twice what I was currently paying for rent. When I suggested we consider a more modest budget, given our combined financial situation, she looked at me like I'd just asked her to move into a cardboard box. She told me she had standards now, that she had already compromised enough by living in my current apartment, which admittedly wasn't in the best neighborhood. Now that we were engaged, she said it was time to upgrade to something more fitting for a couple planning their future. When I explained that my income, while decent, couldn't support that lifestyle, she simply reminded me again about her debt. Not as an apology, but like it was just a fact I'd agreed to live with. You knew about my debt when we met. It's part of the package, she said. If I had a problem with it, I should have walked away before proposing. Hearing those words hit me like a punch in the gut, like her financial mess was just another personality quirk I had to accept. I told her, calmly but firmly, I get it. I really do. But what I got wasn't what you expected. The next morning, I called my company's legal department and asked for a referral to a family law attorney. I explained I was getting married and wanted to discuss prenuptial agreements. The lawyer I met with was a sharp woman in her 50s, someone who listened patiently as I laid everything out. The debt, the spending habits, the financial imbalance between us. She asked detailed questions about my assets, my income, and what I hoped to protect. By the end of the meeting, she was taking notes and explaining how a prenup could protect both of us, especially if one partner was bringing significant debt into the marriage. We scheduled a follow-up to start drafting the document. Meanwhile, my fiancée kept planning the wedding and apartment hunt. She even started a Pinterest board filled with venues that cost more than some people's entire yearly income. When I suggested maybe we should discuss a budget, she waved me off, saying we had plenty of time. Finally, the prenup arrived. It was detailed and clear. Any debt brought into the marriage would remain the responsibility of the person who incurred it. Joint assets would be protected from individual creditors. It laid out how shared expenses would be split based on income ratios, and it included clear guidelines for what would happen if the marriage ended, protecting both parties. I sent the document to her office one Thursday afternoon. Less than an hour later, she called, her voice shaking with anger. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing. I calmly told her she was right. Her debt was part of the package. I was just making sure that package was clearly labeled. She accused me of not trusting her, of trying to control her, of misunderstanding what marriage meant. I told her I was protecting both of us by setting clear financial expectations. Things escalated quickly. She said if I couldn't accept her fully, debt and all, maybe we weren't ready for marriage. I agreed. Maybe we weren't. That night, she didn't come home. Or the next night. On Saturday, her sister called to say she was staying with them while she figured things out. I used that time to think, to get some clarity without the emotional pressure I'd been under for months. I started adding up everything I'd spent covering her expenses over 18 months. Over $30,000. Money I'd saved for a house, for our future, just gone. I thought about all the conversations we'd had. About kids, retirement, dreams that require financial stability. How could we build a future when one of us was drowning in debt, and the other was expected to be the perpetual lifeguard? When she came back, it wasn't alone. Her sister and mother arrived too, clearly briefed and ready for battle. Her mother started by lecturing me about love. How real love means accepting someone completely, flaws and mistakes included. I agreed, but pointed out the difference between accepting someone's past and enabling their ongoing poor choices. Her sister jumped in, saying prenups were for people who didn't trust each other, who were planning divorce before marriage even began. She argued that if I really loved her sister, I'd be willing to face financial challenges together. I thought about the irony. When it came to accepting her debt, I was expected to embrace it fully. But when it came to protecting myself legally, suddenly I was the bad guy for not having blind faith. My fiancée mostly stayed quiet during the confrontation, letting her family make her case. When they finally asked what I wanted, I was honest. I wanted a partner, not a financial dependent. I wanted someone willing to work with me to build a stable future, not someone expecting me to fund their lifestyle while ignoring their responsibilities. The prenup was non-negotiable. They left in a storm of slammed doors and accusations. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. Then she called. Her voice was softer than I'd heard in months. She asked if we could meet for coffee and talk things through rationally. I agreed, curious if this was a real change or another manipulation. She arrived perfectly put together but different somehow. She apologized for her family's behavior and admitted the prenup had forced her to face some uncomfortable truths. She confessed she'd gotten comfortable with me covering the bills and had stopped seeing it as temporary help. She understood why that wasn't fair. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe this was the wake-up call she needed. But then she presented her counteroffer. She wanted modifications to the prenup, provisions protecting her in case of divorce so she wouldn't be left completely devastated financially. She wanted to adjust expense-sharing ratios to account for her debt. I realized she still didn't get it. Signing a legal document was just another negotiation for her, not a real shift in responsibility. I told her I needed time to think. That night, I called my lawyer. She was professional, but skeptical. The changes would weaken the protections I'd fought for while maintaining my financial burden. She suggested I ask myself if this was really about the prenup or something deeper, fundamental compatibility issues that no contract could fix. Over the weekend, I made my decision. Monday morning, I called my fiancée and asked to see her. She came over expecting to continue negotiating. Instead, I handed her a small box. Inside was the engagement ring she'd left behind when she stormed out weeks earlier. I told her I'd realized something important. The prenup wasn't the real problem. It was just a symptom of deeper incompatibility. She saw my financial responsibility as a resource to use, while I saw partnership as mutual support and shared sacrifice. Those views couldn't be reconciled with any legal document. She was quiet for a long time, turning the ring over in her hands. Then she asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind, to prove she was committed to changing. I told her only time and consistent actions could do that. And I wasn't willing to bet my financial future on a maybe. She asked if I'd ever really loved her, or if I'd just been evaluating her like a financial investment all along. That question stung because there was some truth to it. I had loved her, the version I thought she was, the person who was struggling but working toward independence. But reality was different. She was still trying to negotiate terms that let her avoid full responsibility. She left quietly, taking the ring with her. I never found out if she kept it or returned it. 3 months later, I ran into her sister at a coffee shop. She told me my ex-fiancé had moved back in with their parents and was working 2 jobs to tackle her debt. Part of me felt guilty for not being there to support her, but a bigger part felt relieved. She was finally taking responsibility for her problems instead of expecting someone else to fix them. 6 months after that, I bought a house, a modest place in a good neighborhood, with a mortgage I could afford on my own income. As I signed the papers, I thought about how different this moment would have been if I'd stayed in that relationship. How much more complicated and risky buying a home would have been with her debt hanging over our future. I learned something important from all this. Love isn't about accepting everything unconditionally. It's about finding someone whose values and approach to life align with yours enough to build something sustainable. She was right about one thing. Her debt was part of the package. But what she never understood was that packages can be returned if they're not what you ordered. That prenup did its job. It forced us both to face the reality of our financial partnership before making it legally binding. It showed that we had fundamentally different ideas about responsibility, fairness, and what it means to be equal partners. Sometimes, the best way to save yourself, and maybe even the relationship, is to walk away before it destroys both of you. I never regretted walking away, but I did learn to have those hard conversations about money and values much earlier in future relationships. Money matters. Shared values matter. And anyone who dismisses that as unromantic probably isn't ready for the real, practical realities of building a life with someone. The woman I eventually married understood that from the beginning. We never needed a prenup because we were already on the same page about financial responsibility, shared sacrifice, and what partnership really means. But that's a different story for another time.